talk about this. This is the first. The first.
The first gift is humility, and when I was first explaining or talking about the book with Dan Rather, and I'm very privileged that he's been my mentor and has always encouraged me to write and to get back to writing, which, as you know, is very arduous.
His foreword is beautiful, by the way. His foreword for your book shows how much he really reveres you. So anyway, go ahead.
Well, thank you. So I explained to him the 5 gifts that came to me while I was meditating after I lost my home, and I was going through a particularly hellish time. And so I told him humility, patience, empathy, forgiveness, and growth. And he looked at me and goes, those are not American values. And I said, yeah, that's the point, because we're used to living with relative stability, and we don't have the spiritual traditions as they do in many other cultures and countries that help us to endure long periods of instability and adversity. Now, the first gift, humility, is kind of like an anathema to the celebrity-hungry culture that we live in. Because, who doesn't want to have 1 million Twitter followers rather than humility? Who wants to be, humble in the sense of saying, humility basically softens what our initial response of why did this have to happen to me to why not. In other words, it had to happen to someone. What helped me a lot after Hurricane Sandy, when I'd get particularly upset or anguished, I'd say, this isn't happening to you personally. It's happening to 1 million people, and you're just one of 1 million people dealing with a broken, corrupt system. And that grace of humility I would just kind of feel like all my muscles relaxing, and I'd go, wow, that's wonderful. Now I don't have to take it personally. And
well, you're also putting yourself. To me, what you're also saying is, I am part of a larger matrix. Right. I am not alone. Others are suffering what I am suffering. I'm not singled out, because when you feel like a victim, why me? This was done just to me. You go into this, the baby bag, the belly button, marinating in misery, the dirty diaper of despair. I have a lot of expressions.
I love that one. The dirty diaper of despair.
The dirty diaper of despair.
Yeah. I love that. That's perfect. So humility, I would say that humility, kind of takes the edge off, because it helps us to understand, that the first noble truth of the Buddha is that to be human is to suffer. And I remember the first time I read that, and I thought, that means it's not just happening to me. It means that, that I'm not saying that nobody says that to be human is to suffer all the time. Certainly the Buddha talked about this realm of this human realm being 10,000 sorrows and 10,000 joys. And but when we experience a sudden loss or a violent loss of someone or something close to us, we kind of we find ourselves kind of plunged into what I call the ocean of sorrow, and we don't know how to cope with that in a society that believes that happiness equals pleasure. I think
that you're supposed to be happy all the time.
All the time, yes. You're not allowed to feel anything other than, and not just happiness, because true happiness, as I think many people learn through suffering after loss or catastrophe, is true happiness comes from having a sense of meaning and purpose. It doesn't mean that you're playing and that you're eating ice cream and having orgasms all the time. And it means that you genuinely connect with the stream of life in a way that gives you a sense of meaning and a sense of connection. So the gift of patience, of course, we come to, we live in especially with the digital age, they say that if it takes more than 2 seconds to download, most people will get impatient and frustrated if you're on your computer or your phone. So we live in an age where instant gratification is kind of the gold standard. And, patience is the gift that helps us to endure and accept that your heart can be broken, and you can find yourself releasing tears years after the original event. You might be fine, and then suddenly, you hear a song, or you see an image, or you smell something, like Marcel Proust in Remembrance of Things Past. There's a little smell of turkey roasting at Thanksgiving, and then suddenly you're missing your grandfather or your cat or your best friend, and you find that grief suddenly overwhelms you. Because those molecules of emotion can get released by any of the 5 physical senses. So patience helps us to accept that there's no timetable for how we heal. And empathy is the gift that kind of rewards itself. Of all of them, it's the feel-good gift. It's what helps us to connect with others. It's the ability to ask somebody else, what do you need? How can I be there for you? What can I do to help? And most people, I think I've never found anybody who hasn't really experienced a tremendous uplifting, soul-lifting feeling or state from the giving and receiving of empathy. The forgiveness is of course hard, because people think that forgiveness is like a light switch, and you either forgive or you don't. But I like to use the model of an analog dial or a spectrum, which says that if you step into what it's like to be forgiving, not that it's an end state of forgiveness, but when we step into what it's like to be forgiving, it's a dynamic state. We can be forgiving 5% today, 50% tomorrow, 80% the following day. We may go back to 2%. We may never forgive that perpetrator 100%, but we can experience what it's like to be forgiving as an active, dynamic state. And growth.
Also, what I like to do on the topic of forgiving, I like to say, don't try to force forgiveness down your throat, but instead work on understanding and acceptance. Because, if you just have a better sense of understanding of why something happened, if you can come to an understanding, especially in an interpersonal relationship, why this person did what she did or he did. And I understand you, and I look at the big picture, and I understand your story and your limitations and your traumas. Through understanding, I can gain some acceptance. And to me, that's a deeper resolution than just trying to ram forgiveness down my throat. So,
Yeah, I talk about gratitude guilt, and I think there's also forgiveness guilt. We don't have to feel grateful every second of every day. I think it's a very rare person who can say, I'm really grateful for losing everything that I worked for. I'm really grateful for losing the person who I loved most in the world. But, that gratitude can come as a kind of corollary, as a almost like an adjunct to the gift of growth, because we're growing all the time. You don't have to do anything to make yourself grow. Your cells are constantly reproducing. We're constantly replenishing. Every time we breathe, oxygen is replenishing our cells, going through our bloodstream. And so, growth is an organic, natural state. Spiritual growth after disaster is what helps us to reach a point where we can look back at this horrible event and say, wow, I wish I'd never had to go through that. I wouldn't wish it on anybody.
But I wouldn't wish this break on me and you right now, but we got to take it. Okay. And when we come back, we'll talk more about spiritual growth and how much it's important. Be with you in a moment on Love Never Dies Radio.
Omega Institute, offering workshops, retreats, and online learning dedicated to awakening the best in the human spirit. For 40 years, Omega has been a gathering place for great thinkers, creative talent, spiritual teachers, and social visionaries. With 390 workshops to choose from, Omega offers something for everyone. Located in Rhinebeck, New York, just 90 miles north of New York City, Omega's natural environment and quiet pace allow for extraordinary experiences to unfold. Learn more at eomega.org.
Are you ready for the quantum age?
Humanity's next step in evolution?
Dream Vision 7 Radio Network invites you to the extraordinary platform of Evolutionary Voices for the Quantum Age.
Let's explore. Learn more about this upcoming age where we bridge science with spirituality.
Where potentiality meets reality.
Where we take compassion into action.
Our trailblazers and visionaries will ask the whys, the what-ifs, while igniting continuous possibility.
Come along with us into an age beyond what we know today, where we can grow together in unity consciousness.
Experience Evolutionary Voices for the Quantum Age, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern on DreamVision7Radio.com.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
You're listening to Love Never Dies with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. If you yearn to get along better with your life partner or spouse, friends, family members, and even coworkers, Dr. Turndorf's book, Kiss Your Fights Goodbye, Dr. Love's 10 Simple Steps to Cooling Conflict and Rekindling Your Relationship, shows you how to turn conflict into connection for a lifetime of lasting love. Find out more about Kiss Your Fights Goodbye at AskDrLove.com. This is Love Never Dies with Dr. Jamie Turndorf. This show is for you, the listener. Once again, here's Dr. Turndorf.
Welcome back to Love Never Dies. I'm talking with Dr. Laurie Nadel about the 5 gifts. And we were saying that loss and trauma gives us an opportunity to grow in our souls, right? And I wanted to talk more about that because, I had an image when my husband was ripped from me from the bee sting. I had the image of sitting on his lap and sitting on God's lap, which was to me one and the same because our loved ones in spirit are one with God and the saints. And I felt, I got the message, when a child is being disciplined by a parent and taught a very difficult lesson, there's pain in it, but there's also love. That the only way you can absorb the lesson is to feel the parent is loving you enough to bring the lesson. So I was feeling that duality of great pain in having him ripped from me, but also great love and knowing I was closer to Jean and to God than I ever could be.
It's very beautiful.
Yeah. I know it's a very mystical kind of concept, but you really work with that and you feel it. It is a very beautiful, beautiful thing. And you're so broken down, you're just like weeping on your loved one's lap or God's, chest, however you visualize it. You are never more connected in love as when you're in a state of loss.
Well, I think that I think somebody said this, and I've got to come to agree that sometimes what we offer another person, or what we can offer another person, is our own brokenness, and it's in the humility and honesty of allowing another person to see us in that state, that open and vulnerable state, that we are closest to spirit, we're closest to God, but it also allows for a tremendous outpouring of empathy and compassion that is reciprocal.
Yes, it isn't until we're willing to be so open to communicate the truth of our souls that we then give the gift to others. Well, if you're that vulnerable, so can I be, and that is how, I think we can bear anything, Dr. Laurie, if we don't feel alone in it, if we feel held,
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting, after September 11th, I don't know if you were in New York, but all of these altars were, they kind of were created on almost every street corner with candles and poetry and music and pictures of people's loved ones. And it was, I remember I led a meditation, a walking meditation